Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to kick off the new year today with our CEO, Colleen Barry, who is one of my closest friends. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm excited.
We're going to talk today about just the market, what we expect to be ahead for the market, and then also what we expect to be ahead in the industry. So I'm really excited, like as I said, to kick off the year with this because Colleen's just a wealth of knowledge, and I think this will be a great conversation.
It's going to be fun.
Awesome. Yeah, so if you want to just introduce yourself, and then maybe we can get into the two of us as well and how we work together.
Sure. So I'm Colleen Barry, and as you said, I'm the CEO of Gibson Sotheby's, and I've been in the business now for 20 years. Same company too, which is pretty interesting. That's unusual. But people tend to come and stay here, which I think is one of the things that is pretty special about the company. It's like a big family to some extent. And it's also like having a lot of business partners. So there's just something pretty exciting about constantly trying to help one another grow and expand our knowledge, expand our skill sets, and build a great business. So.
Yeah, you came through from the marketing standpoint to more of like a coaching, productivity, and I think that I know you very well, probably better than I need to. But just that, like, you're always coming from like that service and like really wanting to help people, and I think that that's actually going to add a really nice element into today's conversation about where are we going, because you dig so deeply into like why is this happening, what can you do to prepare, and I think with the right focus, like you focus so much so on the things you can control, right? Because of that kind of coaching productivity background, I think, and I used to listen to your conversations, our offices were next to each other, and I like that, and I think that's what people need to focus on now is like we can talk about what's ahead, but what you're focused on and what you kind of narrow the agents' focus on is like, what can you do about it? Like what can we do every day as opposed to worrying about the things we can't control?
You know, it's really interesting. I was having a conversation with a family member last night, and he's in a spot right now where the business that he's in, which is a totally different industry, has been going through big changes over the last several years. And it's very tough to go through those moments. But what he stayed over, so we talked one night about how he was just having all these struggles, but I could sense that he wasn't really focusing on the stuff that he could control. So the next night we had one of those like soft moments where I was like, you know what, I've been thinking about this all night. It was kind of keeping me up a little bit. And so we really focused on what he could control, because that really is where the rubber hits the road.
Right.
You know, that's... You always think about people who go through difficult times in their lives, and we all have these friends who, it doesn't matter what happens, they find a way to thrive. Doesn't matter what happens in their life. And then we've got other friends who, you know, if they get a hangnail, it's going to be 2 weeks of, I can't even believe this happened to me, and you know, and I think the difference there is in how you frame it. You know, how are you framing this moment for yourself? And then what are you doing about it? And so I'm a big believer that action is the beginning of change. That you have to take action first. So I think that's one of the most exciting things about this company and this business that we're in. Is, you know, again, we have 450 agents, so we have 450 business partners. And what we're trying to do all the time is help them figure out what action should they be taking to push their business forward or to improve their life even. You know, because this business does not have great boundaries. You know, so really any action you take in the business is really about your life too.
Yeah, no, I think that's so interesting, and that's one of the things, I mean, it's kind of always the elephant in the room, as ridiculous as it is, because it's been for the last, 2 or 3 decades, it's like, what's going to happen to the real estate agent? And it's so funny because I think people attach this housing shift with that. And on the way in, I was actually listening to something on iBuyers, and I was laughing because they're talking about like how antiquated the whole thing is and how it's all really like, it's all very vertical and like serving itself, and there's really no advocate for the consumer. And I think that that's what you just said. It's like we met with a company last week that was interested in joining us, and I joked because it was their second meeting that like our differentiator is just that we're real people. And they were like, oh my God, that's so funny because that's exactly what we're feeling. And they weren't expecting it. So simple to just be real. But it's so effective, especially from a real estate standpoint or real estate agent standpoint. And I think that for some reason people attach a market shift to this scarcity of, you know, this fear of like what's gonna happen to the real estate agent. Those two things are not related. If anything, I would say it's going to make the real estate agent and that being a real person that's an advocate for your client more important, right? Because I think that when things were moving so fast, maybe those opportunities for something more antiquated to come in, things were happening fast or people were getting whatever price they were going to get. Now they're going to really want to double down and know that someone has their back.
Agreed.
So I think it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember there's a gentleman who I really admire. I want to say that first because I'm about to cut him down hard. But his name is Jeff Jarvis, and he's a professor of journalism at, I think, the City University of New York, but he's also a brilliant author. He wrote a book called What Would Google Do? And I would say I loved 90 to 95% of the book. And that was probably 15 years ago. But in the book, he said real estate agents are going to go the way of travel agents. And what he was missing was any seat on an airplane is very similar to the seat next to it, right? It's essentially a widget to some extent. Right. And it's very, very low risk. Yeah. You know, you're paying $300 to $3,000 depending on where you're traveling and what kind of, flight you're taking and everything. But the reality is that you then, after that flight is over, it's not like you are bound to the flight. It's not like you have a legal obligation. It's not like you have some kind of connection to that flight. And it's the same for your hotel. So there really wasn't much advocacy happening in the travel world. They were really booking agents to some extent, which is not really that helpful. But real estate agents, when they're doing their jobs really well, and I make that distinction because I think that there are agents out there who are thinking of it as, how can I make money? It's very transactional. Right. So it's just, let me get this property up on the web as fast as I can, and then we'll just see what happens. And then if somebody calls to make an offer, then I'll help negotiate it. Which is really, there's not enough in there to really deliver value. So if you're concentrating on delivering value, and most real estate agents, especially the ones in our company, are, then you have something that is very difficult to disrupt. Right. Because it's a human interaction. You just said a few minutes ago that people were commenting on the fact that we're real and that people are real. So what does that mean? Right. And I think of that as meaning like you are present in the moment and you're here really listening and trying to figure out how to help somebody. Well, that's what somebody said in the meeting, Michelle. She was like, we care and we try. Yes. And that's been the new thing. Like, that shouldn't be that simple, but it's almost like profound at this point. It's profound. If you care about people and you try the best to do, like the best you can do by them. And I think that to your point, it's almost, the travel agent thing was interesting when you were talking, because I've seen it more recently, specifically because I've seen people doing Disney trips and stuff like that. And all of a sudden there's this reemergence that I'm seeing. And it's almost like if somebody was like, well, if documents are digital, I'm out of a job. It's like, no, there's actually more you can do to provide more value. Like, that should be, and it's like, yes, travel agents, by and large, people that were just booking got a lot easier. Yes. But busy families who want really amazing trips need the help with like that higher level, now there's an opportunity to provide more value in a different way. And I think that this is just shifting with what is the value that people are looking for. Yes. You can't double down and say, no, this, like me doing this is value. You need to listen to what value people are looking 100%. For. You don't get to define it. Yes. So, at some point, I mean, my dad laughed because a couple of years ago, he needed to do someone a favor. And he was like, I can't believe like everything's digital now. Like back when he was a real estate agent, he had to like drive to people's houses and all these things. But there's a different layer of value that we're providing now, right? Before, that was convenient. You would drive for them instead of them having to make that drive. Well, they don't have to do that now, but now there's all different things we're doing that's helping. And I think it's just staying nimble. It's so interesting. I think, first of all, you're 100% right. I think you can't somehow decide that you're going to decide what the value is. Like the consumer is going to tell you what the value is. Yeah. It's your job to listen. Right. I was listening to an interview with Charlie Baker recently. I can't remember if I told you this. And Charlie grew up in a family, no surprise to anybody who has had the experience of being in the state of Massachusetts for the last several years. But Charlie grew up in a family where his dad worked for the Nixon administration and his mother worked for the local Democratic Party. So there were constantly debates going on at the dinner table all the time, with, of course, love and respect being the underlying element. But the mantra they had in the family is that your receiver is more important than your transmitter, i.e. listening is more important than speaking. That's why you have 2 ears and one mouth. That's right, exactly. So that's, I think, the trick there is trying to understand what somebody needs. So it really takes active listening to understand what the consumer needs. And when you talk about the resurgence there in travel agents, what we're looking for now is curation. To some extent, right? Yeah. Like if you think about the fact that there is probably more music available today at the flip of a switch or at your thumbs, essentially on your phone, than has ever been available to one person instantaneously. So the problem now is not access. The problem is we need curation. There's just too much there, right? Yeah. So it's really interesting. I think all of those things, there's just the challenge is different every time, which I think is so exciting.
Yeah, no, it is. It's awesome. So let's double back just quickly, because clearly we get off on a tangent easily. But so I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Gibson Sotheby's International Realty. You're the CEO of Gibson Sotheby's International Realty. I would say the two of us work hand in hand all day, 100%. Every day. So these might get long, but I just wanted to make sure we lay out that sort of relationship. The two of us are overseeing what's happening in the company, what we're looking ahead at, what the plans are.
So, and we agree 100% all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's important for people to know, is that we don't agree.
Right. When you were just saying the debate thing, I was laughing to myself, like, yeah, we know a lot about that. We always come at things differently.
Completely. And I think what's really amazing, though, is like the Baker family, that there is an underlying love and respect. Yes. So what happens is you and I can have totally different opinions about something, but we both kind of go, okay, I disagree, but I want to hear where you're coming from first.
Right.
And then we can move forward after that. I might still vehemently disagree.
You know what's funny is when I started to talk through this outline, you were like, okay, wait, tell me why. And I immediately got like, because that's what you say to me when you don't agree. And I'm like, actually, she's not disagreeing right now. But in my mind, you're always like, okay, just walk me through why you want to do that. And I'm like, no. But I like that. And I do think we are so different. And I actually think it's really, I think the Baker thing's an interesting example of how that can go well, because it makes everyone in the company too, I think, feel like they can bring any idea.
Yes.
Because we don't think the same.
That's
so
right.
There's always like open communication and conflict about like, what if we tried it this way? Whereas if we were very similar, I think it would be a lot harder to bring a new idea.
I agree.
Or pitch something, because it's like, well, okay,
and there's no rhyme or reason or pattern to
No.
who ends up, sort of, well, winning is the wrong term, but which way we go.
Right.
So it's not like, oh, we always go with mine or we always go with yours, or it's 70-30. I can't even tell you, honestly.
Yeah.
I feel like it's really even.
It really is.
So anybody who comes up with an idea, like sometimes it's not even ours. The two of us are disagreeing, and then someone else, like Michelle, will go, well, what about this? And we're like, oh, that's way better. Right. So I think there's space for everybody's ideas. Actually, that's the purpose of having a big group of diverse people, diverse in age, backgrounds, whatever, is that you get a lot of different ideas. So you're more likely to hear something that's a lot smarter than your own idea.
And leading with like checking your ego from a standpoint of leadership, I think makes a huge difference. I actually had to have a meeting last week about an idea that you had, and the two of us walking into it, Michelle and I, we're like, oh, this was such a good idea. And it's funny, it's like, but the two of us are going to do it. It's like, there's no like animosity of like, I didn't think of this, or like I had a different, it's like we like celebrate that. And I think that really is why we are where we are. So we're looking ahead.
Yep.
You and I, whether we agree or not, I think we agree that there is going to be a market shift if we're not already in it.
We're in it. Yep.
We're in it. Can you tell me, or just talk about how we know we're in it, and what we think might be coming in terms of the shift?
Yeah, actually, I was just talking with Becca about this morning. It's interesting. Market shifts of all kinds, and I would include economic shifts too, right, or similar thing. You usually don't know that it's happening until you're already pretty deep into it. Yeah. And the reason is because in most economic or industrial reporting, we're looking at lagging indicators. So it's at the tail end of some kind of process. And by the time you've gotten to the tail end of the process, in our business, you're 30, 45, 60 days out from when the activity that initiated it started. So by the time you've got some reliable, consistent, patterned data, you're pretty deep into it. Right. And we're definitely seeing a shift. I think there are a couple of things about that are interesting, though. One, I'm hearing a lot of very doomsday-oriented talk out there, and we're always going to hear that because, in the media, the more dramatic, the more scary it is, the more likely it is to get clicks. So that's kind of where we are, just generally speaking, I think.
Shut off the news.
Absolutely, you got to shut the news off. But what we are seeing is not 2008. And I think that's critically important. I mean, I was in the business at that time. That was actually my second market shift in the business, because I started in 2002. We were after the dot-com bust, so there was some activity going on. We were in the midst of a recession then we went into the Great Recession in 2008. And what led into it and all of the factors that I saw during it were very different than what we're seeing right now. We measure the same things. So you're going to see some similarities, but we are not headed into a 2008 situation. And the reason is because 2008 was brought on by very irresponsible lending practices. And we knew it. I mean, I could see it. I just didn't know enough to say, hey, everybody, we need to call someone.
Right.
You know, I remember sitting in a meeting and a mortgage agent saying, oh, we're doing no doc loans now. And somebody said, what does that mean? He said, stated income, stated assets. And I was like, isn't that just encouraging somebody to lie?
Right.
And I turned to the person next to me and said, someone's going to go to jail over this.
Right.
I don't think anybody did here. But, you know, the reality is that kind of stuff was just, I mean, there was somebody's pet got a mortgage. I think I remember hearing somebody's dog got a mortgage on the news. So there were clearly irresponsible lending practices happening back then. We've made a lot of adjustments. They changed processes. So there are so many things in place that have prevented that kind of activity from happening. So that's the first thing. But the second thing to keep in mind is what I think we're seeing is more of a normalizing of the market, right? So market shifts are unavoidable. It doesn't matter if you're talking about an economic market shift, you know, or a market shift when it comes to real estate and the housing market. They just are a natural cycle. It's like aging. There's no avoiding it. You can do some things to kind of stave it off, but there's really no avoiding it. So what we're seeing now is the inventory is going up significantly, but that's over the last couple of years where the inventory was at ridiculous lows. Right. I mean, it was so scarce. Right. And by inventory, I mean active inventory, because more homes were being sold than in the prior 15 years. So it's not that there wasn't inventory, but the active inventory
Which is
low.
A very important thing.
It's super
People
important.
think, yes. So we just want to make a point to like say that. I think that people get so confused. They think there's nothing on the market. No. It was how quickly everything was going
That's exactly
off the market.
It. Yeah. It's a velocity issue.
Yes, exactly.
It's not an amount. So what we're seeing now is that the velocity has slowed down. Yeah. And what that means, though, and so rather than saying, "Oh my God, we're headed into another 2008 cycle, we're going to have a market crash," it's nothing like that. But what we are seeing is it's an opportunity for people to actually think about their purchases or think about their home sale. Right. It's time to negotiate. Yeah. It's time to be able to better protect yourself going into a transaction. So,
or just take a breath. I just purchased, and I always say this time of year is my time of year. I have closed on almost every single place that I've ever bought, and I've made a point to do a lot of real estate transactions in December, which sucks. You're getting there, you're trying to put a tree up. I have a kid now, that's a whole different thing, but
you have a little kid too, so you've got a ton of stuff.
Oh, so much gear. It is so funny that you can have someone under 3 feet tall with the amount of stuff that we're moving, and it's so different too.
Little children have way more stuff than we. I can go away for 3 days with a small bag, like a duffel bag.
Yes, yeah.
But when you have a 3-month-old,
at least a U-Haul.
Oh, you need a U-Haul. No, there's no doubt about that, and possibly a moving truck.
And not even for them; it's for you. Like you have the critics. Like my father-in-law is someone that will make the comments about the gear. It's like, this is for me. Like don't get this twisted. Like,
I need the playpen so that I can go to the bathroom by myself.
Yeah. It's all for my convenience, unfortunately. But so we just moved. I lost my train of thought.
Sorry, you were just doing a real estate transaction again?
Yeah. Oh, and you can breathe now. Yes. Like I was saying, so we waited out the market. We sold 2 places, and then we ended up in between. And I think everybody was sort of like, oh, are you waiting for the market to crash? And people use that terminology. It's like, I'm actually waiting until I can just take like a quiet walk through the house, maybe do a second showing, maybe get an inspection. Those are really great, healthy, normal things to be doing.
Normal.
Yeah. I'm not waiting for the market to crash. And if I had to make a move when it was really crazy, I happen to have timing that I didn't. But that was it. And it was like everybody wanted me to try to admit that I'm waiting for the sky to fall. It's like,
and the prices haven't come down.
Yeah, we paid the same amount we probably would have paid anyway.
That's right.
But we took our time.
That's right.
We got to do a second showing. Yeah. We had some, so it's just, you feel like you can take a breath, you can actually make a decision, and I think that that's not a bad thing. Yes. It really isn't.
Well, but I think the other element of it that we probably do need to talk about, because it's not all roses, is the fact that there is a segment of the market that's been hurt. There's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. And by that I mean, the kinds of places typically that young professionals in the downtown Boston area would typically purchase as a first-time home buyer. So condominiums, 1-2 bedroom units typically, we're seeing those stay on the market significantly longer.
Yeah.
And not just in the normal breathing room space, but it's staying on longer. It's a little tougher to get those offers in. And what we're definitely seeing there is the change in affordability for those people because of the mortgage interest rates.
Right.
So that has definitely been affected. And but that again is part of a cycle.
It is part of a cycle, and I really think that everything is going to sort of meet, right? Because if you lose those buyers, I do think, I mean, the prices have started to adjust a little bit, and it really isn't the end of the world.
Nope.
People had a long time to sell at the top. If you missed it, I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't a month long. We had about a year and a half.
Right.
And so you can't think that you're going to get a price that you would have gotten a year ago at this point. I don't think. And I don't think it's anything drastic. Again, this is part of the normalization, but but we're kind of in that middle ground right now where that affordability has dropped off with the interest rates coming up and the prices haven't necessarily adjusted, but not because they're still getting the prices, but because I think people still want those prices. And eventually, you know, if they're on long enough or however that's going to shake out. But it's going to do just that. It's going to shake out. And it's not the end of the world. Like you said, we go through these types of cycles.
And I would call it a flattening or a smoothing out, as our friend Lisa says, you know, just smoothing out of the market. So we're not seeing like any kind of sharp drop-offs or anything like that. And I don't think we're going to see that. And the reason is because we just don't have the inventory. And by inventory, in this case, I don't mean available inventory. I mean, that's part of it. But what we don't have is new houses being built at the speed or at the volume that we need. And there are all kinds of factors that have led into that. Everything from pushing kids to go into college when they used to go to trade schools. And so we've been missing the trades for a long time. And the fact that, you know, in a lot of the southern states, we have to rebuild down there on a regular basis from major storms that are happening very much more regular. So we've got an issue now where we just don't have the homes being built. And so we don't have what you need in a free market economy to drive the prices down, which is a lot more inventory, right? Because it's always supply and demand. And we just don't have the supply. So we won't see giant changes to that.
With that too, though, one thing that could be an upside, I think, is that I think that the radius, so this has been my thing that I've been really interested in. I love, I don't know, like community development, if you will. Like I go out to, I don't know, I always give shout out to like Hudson, Mass. Like we had friends in Worcester and we would meet them for dinner and it was just like adorable downtown. And I love that. I love like a local government that can figure that out or whatever it might be. The community just like gets it together and it makes this incredible place to live. And some of those places are really incredible to live, but your quality of life wasn't there. And I'm not talking about specifically that area, but if you had to commute into the city every single day. So my husband grew up
just because of the commute time. You
know? Yes. Just the time in the car. My husband grew up in Bedford, New Hampshire. That's another one. Like I think it's about 90 minutes without traffic. That's a long commute if you're doing it every single day. There's some really nice communities, whether it be in New Hampshire or Rhode Island, further out in Massachusetts, that typically when we hit a little bit of a dip, we had this very specific radius that I would say was absolutely within 45 minutes without traffic, maybe even 30. And after that, those places would fall off precipitously compared to...
In terms of pricing.
In terms of pricing. Those are what would see, because I really believe that was where, like, it was harder to commute. But so with this shift, I'm curious, and my hypothesis is within 90 minutes, that's going to double the radius, which could be very interesting in terms of inventory too, because I do believe that families that would have never gone that far out, 90 minutes out, now they're only coming in 2 days a week, or they're completely working from home. And there's a lot of different shifts that are now happening in the household with that. They do need the bigger space, right? And they can get them in. So, I mean, we went a little further out than we ever would have had. I mean,
and look at the quality of life you're getting, though. I mean, what a shift that is. And I think it hasn't even gone to the 90-minute mark. We're seeing people who have changed states. You know,
but it's going to be interesting really what the economic impact of that is. It's going to be different, and nobody knows what it's really going to look like. But I think it's going to be good. I think there's going to be really cool communities and places and higher quality of life. And
actually, it's almost a reversal of everybody fleeing to the city. Area, right? It kind of moves it back into towns. I'm a big fan of Main Street communities.
Me too.
Right? I love those. I mean, I grew up in in a town, and probably a lot of it was the time that it was, because it was when factories were closing down and malls were much more of a driver. Like everybody wanted to live near a mall.
Sure.
I hate malls. I'm just not. And it's not. I don't think there's anything wrong with a mall. No. I'm not a good shopper. I don't enjoy shopping. Right. So, so I think what I've always loved ever since, and I've looked for, is that Main Street kind of community. Yeah. And that's where I live today. I live in one of those where you've got all these little Main Street kind of areas, outdoor shopping, little shops where you walk in and they know who you are and all that stuff. So I think we'll see much more of that. I agree with you. Yeah. And there's something so positive about that too, because especially in Massachusetts, we have a varied economy, which is beautiful. However, all of those driving factors, almost all of them, were centered around Boston and Cambridge.
Yeah. Right.
And the challenge that we've always run into is that those areas were totally insulated from all kinds of major market shifts.
Sure.
In 08, we continued to have incredibly low unemployment. And we still do today. I mean, it's much lower than the national average because we have so many different economic factors that are driving it. The schools, medicine, biotech. Right. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, technology. So the financial world, so all of those things are there driving it. So if one of them gets knocked out, there's still a ton to keep the economy moving. But the challenge we were having always was that 95 was sort of that beltway, that all of that activity happened here, and then it precipitously, as you mentioned, dropped off in terms of housing costs, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? You need a variety of housing costs. Sure. But what happened was employment and salaries and all kinds of other things really dropped off at the same time, going outside those areas. And I would love to see that spread out.
Yes, that's kind of what I mean. And this isn't some doomsday thing of everyone's leaving the city. It's so funny. They're not. No. We have a lot of very youthful staff. And when we kind of hit this, okay, we're coming back after the pandemic, I mean, we both were talking about it. It's like we thought more people would want to be from home. And we have these incredible, lively city offices, and people want to get back into them. They want to go for drinks after work. They want to walk for lunch. So there isn't some, and that's another thing the media really pushed, right? Everybody's fleeing the cities. And no, it's a really nice, as we normalize, I think it's actually really nice to see maybe if people spread out a bit more and homes become a little bit more affordable in areas that people couldn't typically have gone out to. It's a really good thing, and it might have a nice impact on the
outlying areas.
Yeah, and also the normalization that's coming, right? It might make it a little bit more of that soft landing, I think.
So true.
Yeah.
So true.
So with that, home buyers looking to purchase their dream home, what can help increase the likelihood of the successful home buying process right now?
So again, there's a real great opportunity for buyers out there right now. And the reason is because they have some negotiating power. And I don't mean that it's a buyer's market. It's really not a buyer's market. It's just stabilizing. It's normalizing so that we've got some balance between buyers and sellers. But you can, as you said, put in a contingency you could do a home sale contingency sometimes. Sometimes you could do a mortgage contingency. Sometimes you could do an inspection contingency, or maybe all of those, right? So those are all things that are protection measures for buyers. So it's actually a really good time for buyers at the moment. The challenge for some buyers is going to be the interest rates. And there are lots of things that they can do about that. So when it comes to mortgage interest rates, you can go to local banks, which actually tend to lag behind what's happening with the big brokerages out there with mortgages, big lenders. So they tend to have lower interest rates right now because the interest rates have been rising. So they're lagging behind with slightly lower interest rates. So that's one option. There are also ARMs, adjustable rate mortgages, which so many people remember from back in 05, 06, 07 as being a bad thing. But what you have to keep in mind is these are typically longer ARMs. People plan to stay in their houses longer, right? So it's a different situation. And again, qualifications are hugely important. So people who are getting ARMs today are qualified to get an adjustable rate mortgage. Yeah. So that's another way. There are also interest buy downs, which we're starting to see some sellers do. Rather than making a price reduction, they'll offer to purchase a buy down on the rate. Yeah. So maybe it's a 2-1 buy down, which means in the first year, the interest rate's going to be 2% less than what they're seeing out there in the market. And then for the second year, it'll be 1% less than they're seeing in the market. So that just gives people some room there on the purchase price and their
and to really explain
power.
that, because I think that gets really confusing, at least for consumers, and you just explained it really well, but just to kind of like dig a little deeper, it really just means there is a lump sum of money that's determined by the lender. Mm-hmm. So instead of saying, can you pay, and usually it's not that much when you really look at it. Yeah. So instead of saying, can we have a $5,000, or maybe whatever it might be, decrease to the price, the seller brings $5,000 to the closing table, which is negotiated or however that might be, and it pays off your interest rate to a point where it's lower than it is right now.
That's right.
Which softens the first, because the hardest time is the first year, swallowing that big payment.
That's right.
We were talking about that. I was talking about that with friends the other day. And then you sort of get used to it. Mm-hmm. So it's 2 points lower, then it's 1 point lower. So it's a little higher. And there's always options to refinance. It eases you
into it.
Yeah, it's just, but I think people get a little confused and it's like, oh, that's crazy. None of this is crazy. It's actually all normal practice. It's just we didn't have these negotiations. So, and that was something I wanted to really kind of make sure we got across today, was like, there are incentives to buy now, right? Yeah. This is, if you want to buy, I mean, I just did it. So like, I was saying that the other day, like I went out and it's like, if you want to do something, you should be looking right now, I think personally, because there are tools like that you could use. A lot of the sellers that are on right now are motivated. Yes. I think if somebody didn't have to be on right now, especially with the holidays, that's what I'm seeing and laughing at right now with the media, is like, all this crazy doomsday stuff. It's like every year around the holiday season, it gets so quiet. Like, don't make this seem like it's anything more than that. But if someone's on right now, they probably need or really need to sell.
That's right.
So it's a good time if you need something. And there are a lot of tools. And all of our agents are very well versed on all of those tools.
Yeah, that's I think the critical thing right there is when the market is just screaming along, you see people, again, the value is different for an agent in that moment. Right now, the value for an agent, or what an agent can really bring to the table, is expertise and connections in the business. So in other words, think about your real estate agent as being part of an advisory team. That's really what you want to put together as an advisory team. So you're talking about someone who can help you find the right community for you in terms of whatever your criteria are, someone who can help identify the right houses that are available. Again, this is like curation. We were just talking about this earlier, is that what's needed is curation. But then beyond that, it's helping to put together who's your lender going to be if you're borrowing money, and who are the options that are out there, and are there state programs you can take advantage of, or federal programs you can take advantage of. And there are both of those right now. There are programs in different areas where they really want to encourage people to purchase properties. So the rates are even lower, or maybe there's a lump sum of money that comes to the table. Like, I'm thinking right now, I think there's a program called the Eagle program to help people purchase properties in certain communities. So there are lots of these things available, but the important thing to keep in mind is, unless you have a really great agent, they may not know that.
Right.
So their answer may be, well, then you just can't buy right now, which is not the case.
Yeah, they need to know who to point in the right direction to talk to.
Right. So what you really want to talk to or talk about with a potential real estate agent or mortgage agent is, who's my advisory team going to be? And I think about this in terms of also, it's the same in terms of financial planning. So my wife and I, over the last several years, have done all of our estate planning and our wills and, medical proxy and all that stuff. And that all came from our financial planner, who sees himself as essentially like a personal trainer for our financial lives. So every year, and you know this because you've worked with him too, Jeff gives me a call and says, when can we get together and talk about what's happening?
Right.
And the way that I see that is, in the beginning I was like, why do we have to do this? And I realized every time he's trying to make sure that the goals that we had last year are the goals that we have this year. What's changed, if anything? Here's where we are to date, and all of those things. But he said, this is not just what you're saving for your retirement, what you're saving for Albert's education. Those are not the totality of your financial life. That's also, what are you going to do with the assets if you pass? What do you do with your son? All of those things. Right? That's right. That's right. Absolutely. 100%. Welcome to another child.
Yeah.
But so.
Actually, yeah, never mind.
Yeah. So I think what's really neat about that is, you want to think about purchasing a home as an exciting time, but it's also a time where there are going to be a lot of different things that are involved. And the best way to do that is to employ the right people to help you with that process. So you want to put together an advisory team.
Yeah. So lastly, because we've talked a lot about buyers, so I'm a seller right now.
Yep.
How am I navigating this market? What can I be doing?
Yep. So it's interesting. It's going to depend on the house, in the neighborhood, and sometimes on the street.
Right.
And the reason I say that is because when when everything is going up and up and up, or everything's going down, 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 there is, in either direction, there is sort of that rising tide lifting all boats, or the tide ebbing is kind of dropping all of them. But when you're in that transitional period, it breaks up into micro markets. So you can't say, how's the market going, and give one blanket statement. I mean, you can, but what you're missing out when it comes to advising an individual seller is what's going on specific to their house in the market. And so what you want to do first is take a look at what's going on with that. So, and by that I mean houses that are similar to yours in your area. Not only what have they sold for recently, but how many of them are on the market right now? Because that's what we're starting to see, is that there is more available inventory building up. Not to unhealthy levels. I mean, you're talking in many cases under 2 months of inventory. So, and they say nationally that 6 months of inventory is a balanced market. So obviously we're not in any kind of danger zone at all that way. But what you want to be looking at is what is your competition out there, if you think about it that way? What is the pool of available properties? And then next, you're making a decision about when would be the right time to do this and how. And in that moment, there's marketing that you're thinking about. Pricing is a function of marketing, if you think about it, because what you're doing at that point is positioning your property in the marketplace. And you're deciding what is going to be the competing property.
Right.
So if they're going to look at 4 or 5 properties, which 4 or 5 properties do you want to put your house up against? You want it to be the best in class in whatever group that you're putting it in. So it's going to be all of those things, but you need to talk to someone who, again, can figure out, based on where you are in your finances, based on where you are in your life, based on a lot of different factors. Do you need to sell now? And if you do, is now the right time? And what would you have to put it on for? And what's your mortgage situation and everything else? So, I mean, there's so much to consider. But I think the important thing to keep in mind is there's not one blanket answer right now for sellers.
And the micro market thing is so important. Getting a good agent is more important than ever.
Yes.
I think right now pricing right is more important than ever. Right now you do not want to sit. And you don't want to come out and say, okay, let's try this for a while. You want to come out strong. You want to get it, because there are still people looking. There are so many people they say they're sidelined. There's nothing to really make them sidelined. If you price something right, they're going to come out and they're going to look at it.
That's right.
If you come out really high, then you have to drop it. You don't want to be in that zone.
And we are still seeing properties go for multiple offers.
Right.
Over ask.
If you bring in the competition. And like I said, the sidelines don't mean anything in real estate. They haven't given anything up. They still have their pre-approvals. They have everything going. If you come out strong right now, it's a great time. And I do think that this time of year, when you're back in the house, right, and all of that, like with the winter time, I mean, in this area, you start to really realize if the house is too small or whatever it might be. So there are motivating factors for buyers as well.
So let's imagine that you have a house that an agent comes in and says, geez, right now, these properties, the kind of house that you have and where it is, they're not as much in demand and there's a lot of available inventory. Well, at that point, you're trying to figure out, how can we make our house more attractive?
Right.
And so that's where I would look at buy downs. I would seriously be looking at those. Maybe a 3-2-1 buy down.
Offer them, right.
Right? So that becomes a motivating factor for a buyer. All things being equal, looking at that marketplace, that pool of properties, maybe yours is really similar to a bunch of others. Well, with this one, I get a 3-2-1 buy down.
Yeah, right.
That makes a huge financial impact for them. So there are things that you can do, let's say in your micro market. If it's not moving very well, there are things you can do to set yourself apart.
It's funny you say that. I was talking to one of our agents the other day, and she was saying she's just funny and she's just a hot ticket. But she's like very dominant in one neighborhood, and somebody hired like their nephew, and that's brand new in real estate, and that's tough. I mean, it was always tough, but I mean, this isn't just our industry. The boom that happened in the last 2 years, it created a big population of amateurs in a lot of different industries because people could get in while the going was good and do things. But right now, like just to double down, it is really important to find a professional. But she was joking and saying that they said, oh, can you help him? Help him with the pricing. And she's like, I actually gladly helped him with the pricing because if he messes this up, it will mess me up on everything in the future. I am happy to mentor. I'm happy to, and that's an important thing for sellers to realize. It is so important because your neighbor could mess you up, right? So if they have somebody list that doesn't really know what they're doing and then that sits on the market now, you want to launch in a month. So it's important for everybody to work together. And that's the thing that I don't think people realize is real estate agents want to work with other professionals. They want to see, they don't need every listing. Of course they would love it, but it's about professionals. And this is going to be a professionals market. But I think that that's an important thing to just use as an example of it actually really matters.
Well, when you think about micro markets, I totally agree with you. When you think about micro markets, they're little ecosystems. And you're right. Like one house, particularly in a micro market where things get smaller and smaller and smaller, the way that one house behaves on the market actually affects some of the others. Because that becomes part of the landscape that someone is looking at to make a decision. And it's really interesting. One of the things that we started doing, and we've been preparing for this for a while, but is we knew that there was going to be a shift. And having been through a shift before, I remember when '08 happened, there were agents who we had in the company who had started during all of everything, kind of the big buildup, right? And they had been in the market for several years, and they were very experienced, but they had never been through a shift before. And so I remember helping agents go through that with business planning. And that is what we started doing right off the bat. We started talking about what are the tools that you're going to need now, and how do you prepare for those? And I think that's one of the things, and if I can not only say this for the benefit of consumers, but agents who have been in the business even 10 years haven't seen a market shift. And I think the thing to keep in mind is all kinds of agents that you'll see in this industry and we've got agents who have been at it for 40 years, they've survived those market shifts. As a matter of fact, they've thrived in many of them. So how do they do that? And it goes back to focusing on what you can control.
And
it's
the value.
That's right, and figuring out the value. Listen to consumers. What do they need from you right now? It's probably not what they needed over the last several years. So those are the skills that you have to work on. It's really just skill acquisition. And I'm a big believer that in life, it is just skill acquisition. Because when you're born, all you can do is eat and sleep and a few other things. But then someone teaches you even how to make your bed. Someone teaches you how to tie your shoes. Those are just skills that you're acquiring. And over time, as a real estate agent, you're learning about negotiating skills and offer writing skills. That sounds like a silly thing, writing an offer. How complicated could that be? Well, there are so many different terms that you're talking about, different levers that you can push to make a situation that works really well for the buyer and the seller. And so people who are writing really great offers, really creative offers, were the ones who were winning over the last several years. So what do you need now? And that's really kind of a different set of skills. It's really going to be a lot about communication. There's no doubt about that. So that's one critical piece. You need an agent who's going to talk to you and is going to explain what's happening in the market.
And that's a great thing to stop on too for agents, or to really drive home for agents, is like you have to be communicating so well right now, just like we have to be communicating, and that's what we're trying to do right here.
That's right.
We started this whole concept to, I feel like we have such a collaborative group, and I think what happened we don't want everything to be digital. We want to get back. We miss people. We are real people. We want to be with our people. We are back, but this is a way for us to take collaboration to the next level, because we can talk like this, and we want to do everything we can to get information to our agents who are very busy with their day-to-day, so that they can get this information to their clients and realize that things that you might think are so simple, especially as a seasoned agent. 321 buy down, everyone must know about that, right? An ARM, everyone knows what an ARM is. No, they don't. And so sometimes I think people think if they're going to pick up the phone, or if they're going to put something out on, say, social media, or communicate in some form, it's got to be this like profound. I get stuck in that. I'm like, well, that's really simple. Like, what should I say that like might be? I don't have anything important to say. But like, you don't realize that the stuff that you do every single day, day in and day out, that seems so simple to you, isn't simple to somebody who doesn't do that.
That's right. We all discount our own skills. Every single one of us. It's amazing. I remember at one point thinking, I just don't have much to offer to anybody. As an employee, I remember thinking, what I do, anybody else could do. I'm easily replaceable. And what I learned over time is that the way I do things and in certain skills that I have, this is going to sound so silly, using Google. and troubleshooting, I'm really good at.
Yeah.
And it's all patience.
Oh, you're so patient. I was going to say that when we started this. The level, that is one of the biggest, I think, differentiators between us. And I don't, like, need to just embrace it. I'm not a patient person. You can sit and troubleshoot things. Yeah. I'm literally like, just throw it away.
Right.
Like, I can't.
My computer won't turn on, just throw it away. I'm like, hold on, is it plugged in?
Yeah. Car won't start.
Forget it, just leave it wherever it is.
Yeah.
Well, I think, it's interesting. I think that the reality is, that, again, all of us discount the skills that we have. And I think agents oftentimes do that. They fall into that. Well, what could I possibly offer to my past sellers? Why should I even be reaching out? I can't offer them anything.
Right.
I remember at one point, we did a fun exercise. And the exercise was really to get agents thinking creatively about the value they have. And this was actually after the 08 mortgage crisis. So everything was kind of slowed down. It was tougher to get deals done. It was just a more difficult market environment. And we went through this activity where we said, well, what are the values you offer to your clients? And we listed probably 10 things on the sheet. As a group, there were like 20 of us, 25 of us in the room. And then I played a video. And there's this guy, I'm going to forget where he was, but it was in a very impoverished area of the world. And he was taking a water bottle and filling it with water, putting a little bit of bleach, then drilling a hole into the tin roofs in his area. These are the little houses, probably 100 square feet, really small, dirt floors. And he was drilling a hole and he was putting them in there and kind of, securing it in its place. And that light, when the light would hit the water bottle, it would go through the bleached water and diffuse the light. It was basically the equivalent of a 25-watt bulb. So people who don't have electricity suddenly had indoor light in their houses from something that we consider to be trash. And so we watched that video, and then at the end we said, all right, now what's your value?
Right.
And everybody started coming up with different things. Well, I can recommend people to do work on people's houses. I can advise people on what to do to increase the value of their house. I can advise, and all of a sudden we had 35 things.
Right.
And I think it's a good exercise for anybody to go through. It's just write the stuff down, but then stop and really think about your daily activities or the kinds of things that people ask you questions for. And if you need to, ask your friends.
Yeah.
They'll tell you what
I
you
was
do
going to
really
say,
well.
come at people with them in mind, not you.
That's right.
And then you're great. Like when you were just saying, like when you call someone, if I had somebody calling me, like my financial advisor, share information with me that I maybe already knew, I wouldn't cut them off. But they're going to get the vibe right away. Like, oh, yeah, I kind of know this. But then we might still chat about something else. But they're coming at me with something. So don't be afraid to just pick up the phone or whatever you might. I think that's a good reminder, especially right now. Everyone wants to know what's going on. Yeah. And I think to kind of tie the bow on all this, nobody really knows. We don't have a crystal ball, but we know what we do know. We know what we can control.
That's right.
And we as the professionals in this industry do get information, sooner than most people do. And we can disseminate that information in a way that's providing value for people. But I think you're so right. If you know what your value is, if you're looking around and paying attention to your audience, using your ears, like where we started, listening, what are they looking for?
And you know what's interesting? I have a theory that I've even been thinking about writing this or doing a presentation about it. But people will say to me a lot of times, because I do a lot of public speaking, they'll say, oh my God, you are a natural at public speaking. How is it that you're so comfortable? How are you not terrified to get up there and talk to 400 people or 1,000 people or something? And the truth of the matter is, first of all, I do get nervous before I go up and do public speaking. I just read at my son's classroom last week, and I was terrified. Terrified might be strong, but I was scared. And I told the kids that, by the way, because I want them to understand that everybody feels that way. It's normal. But the reason that I'm able to do it and do it well is because I focus on the audience.
Right.
My whole job when I'm up on stage or I'm speaking to a group on Zoom or whatever it is to deliver value to the people who are listening.
Right.
And so once you focus on somebody else, all of a sudden your insecurities start to go away. Mm-hmm. And it actually is something that can really cause people to go into action and come out of that fear mode, that hiding mode. So, we have an agent who during COVID, actually a lot of our agents found really great ways to add value. But I remember in the early stages when people were really struggling to figure out, how can I help other people right now when you couldn't even go see somebody? And one of our agents, Lisa, She, a different Lisa than I was talking about earlier, she went and into her garden. She's got a beautiful flower garden. And she started cutting flowers, and she became the flower fairy, I think she called herself.
Yeah.
And she would just drop flowers off with a little anonymous note at people's houses. And that was such a huge impact on people's lives to know that they were being thought of and that somebody cared about them and somebody took this action for them in a moment where there, for a number of people, there was a lot of despair going on because there was forced isolation and there was a ton of fear, lots of fear. So there are all kinds of things that we can do to deliver a value to people, but we just have to listen and try to figure out how we can do it.
Yeah, no, I love it. Well, I think we really hit most of the points for today. And I think the bottom line is like that we're all kind of coming at this together and just finding a professional that can help you navigate through.
Agreed.
Being the professional that's helping provide that value.
100%.
Did you have anything you wanted to close with?
It's actually, one thing I will say, there was a question when we were talking about doing this that I even talked to Becca about, and I said, there was a question on the sheet that said, what was an interesting fact that most people don't know about you? And, what I was thinking about before we started talking was something that actually relates completely to this, which is I went to school for graphic design, and I'm not a very good graphic designer, but it was a creative job, and I was a creative person. I love to paint, draw, and do all this stuff. It was something you could actually make a living at, doing creative work. But I will tell you, in the years since, I've done a lot of different jobs. I started my work here answering phones, as you know, 20 years ago, and then from there, I worked in the marketing department in the graphic design position, and then I was a sales coach, and did business planning with agents, and now as a CEO. Progressively, my jobs have gotten more creative, which I think is something that probably most people wouldn't expect. But the reason for that is because it's my job to deliver value every single day to the people who work here. So that means from our agents, who are my business partners, to the people who are sitting at the front desk doing marketing work for us, to you and the rest of the folks that I collaborate with on the leadership team, and to the owners of the company. It's really my job to deliver value to every single person here. And that takes creative thinking. A lot of creative thinking. So I think that's something I thought would just be helpful for people to understand. And I think it says a lot about the culture of our company.
Yeah, that's what I think is, I actually love that. I was thinking that when you were just saying that. And when we started, we were talking about how we have 450 business partners. And we very much treat our whole leadership team like partners.
Yes.
And having partners, it's almost like a marriage. Like, it's hard. You need to figure out how people are, why they are that way, and especially when you're trying to provide value and get the most out of them, right? So it's like, it's exhausting, but it's really fun. And it is. You have to be creative and you have to pivot all the time. You have to kind of like change your hats and think differently. And I think that that's really what we both love the most. Yeah.
It makes it a really fun job.
Yeah, most of the time.
Yep.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I think this was great. Thank you so much for doing this with me today. And we will definitely do more this year, but this was a great kickoff.
Great.
Thank you. So if anyone has any questions on the market or wants to elaborate a little bit further on anything we talked about today, I hope everybody knows where to find both Colleen and I, but you could shoot me an email if you need information for Colleen. That's at nicole@gibsonsir.com.